Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Cove. And
Hello,
welcome
everybody. I hope everyone can hear me. I am very pleased to welcome everyone and to say welcome to Cove. I'm Wendy Watson-Wright, a Cove board member, the former head of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO, and a current member of the UN Joint Group of Experts on the Scientific Aspects of Marine Environmental Protection, or GSEM. I'd like to welcome you all to Cove's third panel discussion on our Changing Tides panel series. And today I am joined by four very impressive women who will talk about their experiences in participating in the ocean sector and in building networks and pathways for entry as non-traditional workers within this blue part of the global industry. Now, I'll introduce my guests in just a moment, but first, a little housekeeping. We have over 240 people online with us today, and we encourage you to participate in the conversation by sending your comments and questions via the chat function, which would be on your screens. I have several Cove members working in the background, and I would like at this point to thank and acknowledge Cheri Scully, who really is the author of this whole series and the driving force behind it, to Anna Naylor, Kyle Burton, Paul Guardia, and Leslie Monroe for all their help and hard work. Now, these folks will help to curate your comments and questions in real time and interject them into the conversation. And this will be a conversation today, I will say, with no presentations. Just some good questions and concise responses to get the discussion started and to keep us focused. We'll be recording the session, and the YouTube link will be available later today if you'd like to revisit it or share it with any of your colleagues. Now, I'm honored to introduce today's panelists, and I'll give only brief introductions, but I would encourage you to read the longer bios, which are posted on the events page at Hi there. I guess we're live now. I was talking away and thought we were already live. Good afternoon or morning, depending on where you are, everyone, and welcome to Cove. I do hope you all can hear me. My panelists can nod if they can hear me. Yes, they can. That's great. I am Wendy Watson-Wright. I'm a Cove board member, former head of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO, and a current member of the UN Joint Group of Experts on the Scientific Aspects of Marine Environmental Protection, or GSEM. And I'd like to welcome all of you to Cove's third panel discussion in our Changing Tides panel series. Today, I'm joined by four very impressive women who will talk about their experiences in participating in the ocean sector and in building networks and pathways for entry as non-traditional workers within this blue part of the industry. Now, I'll introduce my guests in just a moment, but first, a little housekeeping. There are 240 people online with us today, and we encourage you to participate in the conversation by sending your comments and questions via the chat function. And I can see some of you are already doing that. I have several Cove team members working in the background, and I'd like at this point to acknowledge and thank Cheri Scully, who developed and really is the driving force behind the series, Anna Naylor, Kyle Burton, Paul Guardia, and Leslie Monroe for all their help and hard work. Now, these folks are going to help curate your comments and questions in real time and interject them into the conversation. And this will be a conversation today, with no presentations, just some good questions and concise answers to get the discussion started and to keep us focused. We'll be recording the session, and the YouTube link will be available later today if you'd like to revisit or to share this Changing Tides event. So now I am honored to introduce today's panelists. I'll give only brief introductions, but I'd encourage you to read the longer biographical sketches, which are posted on the events page at the coveocean.com website. First, we have Sandra Greer. Maybe, Sandra, you can just raise your hand so people know who you are. A fellow Cove board member, corporate director, and retired president and CEO of Amirix Vemco. Sandra serves on the board of directors of Nova Scotia Power, of Amirix Systems Inc, of Nova Scotia Business Inc, or NSBI, and she's on the board of governors of Acadia University. Sandra was president and CEO of Amirix from March 2002 to November 2012. We then have Cheri Butt. Cheri, hello, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Women in Resource Development Corporation, or WRDC. She has over 20 years of executive level experience in a variety of industries, including nonprofit, communications, market research, information technology, and post-secondary education and training. Now, as CEO of WRDC, she provides overall strategic, operational, and financial leadership. And Cheri serves on a number of gender equity committees, advisory, and inclusion networks. Third, we have Niru Somayajula, who is president and CEO of Sensor Technology Inc, which is a world leader in high-tech manufacturer of underwater sonar solutions in Collingwood, Ontario. Niru joined the family business in 2007 and assumed the role of president and CEO in 2011 when she assembled a new management team and structured a buyout program to acquire majority shareholdings. And finally, we have Denise King, who is Vice President of Market Analysis, Planning, and Support for Amirix Systems Inc. Amirix, through its Vemco line of products, is a world leader in the supply of acoustic transmitters and receivers used by marine biologists the world over to study behavior and migration of aquatic animals. So welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for being on our panel. Now, just before I pose the first question, I would like to say that gender is top of mind for many organizations. I mentioned GSAMP in my opening, and we are spending a considerable time ensuring gender and geographic representations on GSAMP and its working groups. And we'll be on a panel at the upcoming World Maritime University workshop on empowering women for the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. I'd also like to say that Fisheries and Oceans Canada, as lead of the Commonwealth Blue Charter's Ocean Observation Action Group, has commissioned a very interesting, and I think you will find useful, paper on gender equity in ocean science, which should become public in the very near future. And I'd like to congratulate the author, Carol Ann Black, on a job very well done. Now, let's move into the questions, starting with you, Niru. And I would remind you to unmute yourself before you answer. Niru, you've already had a long and distinguished career in the marine industry. We'd like you to describe your career path and tell us how you ended up where you are, your sources of inspiration and or help that you received along the way. So, Niru.
Hi, thanks, Wendy. Hi, everyone. So as you heard from Wendy, I took over the family business about 13 years ago. And the intention for me was actually never to stay in the business. I was brought in as part of a management transition period as the company was getting ready to be sold. And so I was planned to be there for 3 years, get the company in a state that was stable, and then I was going to be moving on. And about 1.5 years into the transition period, the deal fell through, and I fell in love with the business. And so I took some of my management team, and we ended up buying the business out from my parents, and then growing it. So as Wendy mentioned, we have our headquarters in Collingwood, Ontario, where there's about 35 people that work there. And about 2 years ago, we expanded to our new facility, which is here in Dartmouth, which is where I am right now. Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, at the Cove, with lots of other really fascinating ocean tech companies. So when I joined the business many years ago, my mom gave me some really interesting advice. My dad wanted me to be technical, and I have a technical background in geophysics. But my mom gave me some really interesting management advice saying that the person that looks after the money is actually going to be the one that runs the business. And so technical is great, but you really have to know where you're at in the business sense. And I took her advice. And while I didn't have any real mentors, I would definitely consider her one of them as one of the early ones. And as my career grew and the business expanded, we're in a fairly aggressive growth curve right now. I've had lots of help, and it takes a village. And so I've had a number of CEO coaches. I'm also part of two peer groups, two CEO groups that like-minded people that help each other solve everyday problems. And I found both of these to be pretty instrumental in getting me to where I am today. So that's a little bit about me.
Wonderful, and always good to have a very wise mother advising you in the background. And nice to hear you say that she's definitely a mentor of yours, Niru. Cheri, I'd like to turn to you now. Through the Women in Resource Development Corporation, or WRDC, you conduct research into gender inclusion in the resource industry. What does your research show about careers of the future, and how can we help young girls consider pathways into those future economies, like the blue economy? And as well, how can we do a better job of socializing female youth for the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM careers in the future? So, Cheri?
Hi, yeah. At WRDC, we've been involved in gender equity in the natural resource industry for over 20 years. We started in 1997. And in 2002, we actually created a charitable arm to have services and programs for female youth around STEM. We know that technology and ocean tech and the marine areas are areas that hold unlimited potential, I think, when it comes to careers for the future. However, we also know that unfortunately, most youth, and particularly female youth, really do not see themselves in those careers in general. We've conducted assessments, evaluations, and research in this area for a long time, and some of the things that we found to be most successful in encouraging and inspiring young women to look at careers where they are typically underrepresented include primarily knowledge and experience. So they need to know that these careers exist. They need to see successful women in them, such that they can see themselves in those careers. They also need to have hands-on experiences to truly make informed decisions about whether these careers are something that they would be interested in, that they're passionate about, that they're interested in pursuing. And I think it's also really important to note that until society treats males and females equally, there is still very much a need for gender equity initiatives in this area. And it's one of the reasons why we feel it is extremely important to provide programming where girls can have these experiences in a safe space, in a girls-only environment, such that they feel that they can fully participate and actually gain full benefit of the programs themselves.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And as I indicated earlier, you certainly had a varied career, so you have a well-rounded view. I think making sure that young people know about these possibilities is extremely important. And I also know that Cheri, in another project within COVE, is working on that as well. So Denise, I would like to turn to you now. In Atlantic Canada and elsewhere, it's difficult to decouple the imbalances between urban and rural opportunities from the opportunity imbalances that affect females in communities. And speaking of urban and rural issues, I am in rural Prince Edward Island and experiencing some connectivity difficulties, but so far so good. I want to give an example. Access to extracurricular opportunities and exposure to female role models, may be different between rural and urban. So how can we do a better job of capturing the hearts and minds of females in rural communities to participate in industries of the future related to the blue economy so that they know it's not just all about fishing? And how can we facilitate access to the education and opportunities? So Denise, please.
Thanks, Wendy. Well, so my background is electrical engineering. So I am no child psychologist, but I have raised a son and a daughter. And, you know, my experience tells me that kids are very susceptible to the realities of peer pressure and what goes on around them. And I think for most kids, they don't want to seem that different. They don't want to stick out. They don't want to be the tall tulip in the crowd. And so it's an extra challenge for girls, I think, over boys, to choose to go into a non-traditional role. I think it makes it more difficult. And I'm going to imagine that if you're in a smaller community, I grew up in Cole Harbour, not quite rural, but right on the edge of the city. It's even more difficult because you're less likely to see the role models that make choosing these careers more normalized. Let's put it that way. So I don't think there's a magic bullet to this. I don't think there's just one thing we can do. I think it's a continual working on how we talk to our kids, the language that we use, and giving them the opportunities to see the role models, to see women, like the women on this panel here today, to see them in these roles and understand that these are perfectly normal for any woman to take on. And I think the more that we can do that, the more success we're going to have, whether we're dealing with urban or rural. We just need to be accentuating these things. You know, I think there's an opportunity for us to call upon the many women in our province who are active in non-traditional roles, whether it be business leaders or in technology, to get out to the different communities, to speak to the schools at all different grade levels, to show them the different career opportunities so that they can be more excited about it and also see it again as a more ordinary job for them to take on. One thing I'll point out, I think it's particularly important that we don't focus just on talking to the girls. We need to talk to the boys, the teachers, the family members, so that everybody around our young women will talk about these career opportunities like these are things that girls should be pursuing. I was interested that Niru mentioned her mother. Like Niru, I also had a very outspoken mother who gave me a lot of great advice, so I'll definitely call on as my mentor. And I would speculate that in many cases, the role of a young woman's mother can be make such a huge difference as to whether or not they're willing to try something that maybe is seen as quite different to the rest of their community.
Thanks very much for that, Denise. And I think it's important, as you mentioned, that we talk not just to girls and women, that we do talk to boys and to males, to men, because if we're going to make any progress, we need everybody on the same wavelength and all pulling in the same, rowing in the same direction. I'm being very aquatic today. So, okay, now, Sandra, I would like to turn to you. You know that networks are so important in helping entrepreneurs get their start, and that is who you know, not just what you know. So networks can open doors to customers and funding and other opportunities. And Sandra, I'd like you to please describe your career journey, how you went about building a network, and how developing a network helped you, and perhaps a little advice to those who are out there needing these networks.
Sure. Thanks, Wendy. I'll start with my career journey and then speak to the networking element, the very important networking element. My journey in ocean tech is perhaps a good example of the variety of ways that someone can find themselves here. My degree is in business and my major is marketing strategy, not marketing communications, but strategy, of which, of course, communications is a very big part. More on that later, I'm sure. I started my career in the auto industry as a district manager for General Motors, and that was not yesterday. I can assure you that was very much a man's world, and I was told more than once, no place for a young lady. That said, there were many more who supported a move towards diversity at General Motors, even back in that day, and I'd like to think that I had a small impact on changing others' biases based on my work there. I then went into telecommunications for a number of years, and after that became a strategist for an advertising agency. and a pitch to a new client created for me an offer to become that client's Vice President of Sales and Marketing. I accepted the offer only to quickly find out that the company was suffering as a result of the dot-com bubble bursting in 2000. The then president and CEO of the company was married to a strategy that she had only just developed, not seeing, as most didn't, what was coming, and then the bubble burst. As an officer of the company, I tried to convince her that we needed contingency plans, but she was very committed to her newly minted strategy and felt very strongly about it, and she wanted to stay the course. We agreed to disagree, and she fired me. I was not the only one who didn't believe in the vision, but I had the least vested in the company and chose myself as the sacrificial lamb. And a handful of my colleagues decided to approach the board at the time, and with the board's due diligence, the CEO made the decision to pursue other opportunities. And at that time, the chair of the board approached me to come back as president and CEO, to which I replied, hell's no. Remember, the organization was in a death spiral. But with some coaxing from those same colleagues, I did decide to come back as certainly on an interim basis, but I did stay then for 12 years. And what the company needed at the time, and you may perhaps have heard of leadership for the time kind of thinking, but they needed a leader that would listen, that would develop a new strategy in the face of the upheaval in the dot-com world, and someone who could rebuild the company's reputation. That new strategy led to the purchase of a sweet little ocean tech company called Vemco, and the rest is history. We invested our time and resources into developing Vemco into a next generation ocean tech company, and it was eventually noticed by a US organization who bought it and whose board I sit on today. So the important part of this question to me, though, is that about the networking and how important the networking piece is. And believe me, I'm not a super networker. I'm a pretty introverted person, but I had to rebuild the company's reputation. I had to network with bankers, government officials, current and past employees, stakeholders, customers, and other stakeholders. And I created an electronics association at the time to try to band together the electronics companies in Nova Scotia, because we were all in different verticals, but we were very much facing some of the same issues and problems. I can tell you, for someone like me, that was exhausting for a period of time to have to rebuild and network the way we did. And with the help of a handful of superstars at Amirix, we literally revived the company and set it on a new successful trajectory. So all that to say, and I'm sure we'll get into this in more detail later, you don't necessarily need a background in STEM to have an impact in ocean tech. Our reach and our message to encourage more diverse representation needs to be broad and well crafted.
Great. Thank you so much, Sandra. And I like that dot-com bubble bursting. That's a good term. But I was very surprised to hear you got fired. Sounds like
so was
there's a new
Wendy.
podcast called We Regret to Inform You. I haven't listened to it, but apparently it's about very successful people who have had somewhat devastating things happen in their career. Anyway, this is fantastic, and I really appreciate that, Sandra. Now, we finally do have a question from the audience, so I think I'll turn to that question, and I'm going to ask Cheri and Niru both to respond to it. And that question is from Charlotte Underwood. It says, women are often encouraged to take on more masculine behavior to excel in male-dominated fields. Have you felt this pressure in your field, and how can we move away from that mentality? So let's start with Cheri.
Hi, yeah. So one of the things that we've, I think, learned over time, and it was actually one of the things that a concept that really transformed the way that I think about equity in male-dominated fields and careers, is that, this idea that women need to change to fit into a particular industry or environment. And it's what we've done. I think it's what we've done historically. It's how most of us have achieved success in areas where we were one of the only or few females around the table, or in the office, or on an oil rig, or on a ship. I think what we've learned and what we know now, and the shift that we're seeing, is that we know that it's not about changing women to fit the mold. It's about changing the mold. It's time for the mold to change. I think more and more we're learning how that works and what works. One of the biggest shifts I've seen in the 7 years that I've been with WRDC has been a change where more and more business leaders understand the business case for diversity and inclusion and gender equity in their organizations, but they still don't know how. So I think it's really important, and now they're looking more and more for the support in how to do that. I'll leave it to Niru to talk a little more, maybe personally, about her experiences in that area.
Yeah, so I feel incredibly privileged that I have never felt any pressure to fit into a masculine mold. I dress very femininely myself personally, and I think I lead my group with a fair amount of emotion and empathy. But I'd like to think that it's helped me. That's where my passion comes from, and I think eventually that translates into good leadership, and people see it that way. Ultimately, I think authenticity can go a long way, and I like to be who I am, and that's who it is. But I'm very fortunate. I've never tried to fit into any other mold. Maybe that's having a strong female presence in my life. My mom probably instilled a little bit of that, maybe a lot of that. But I've been pretty lucky, actually. And I'd like to think some of this gray hair that's coming in gives me a little bit more credibility when I'm in a boardroom full of people that might be older than me, that might be full of men, different levels of organizations. But I think the authenticity goes a long way. So I'm lucky that way.
Hi, everyone. This is Cheri Scully. I've just been here in the wings just in case we lost Wendy. And sure enough, we have. So I'm just going to pitch hit for her for a few minutes here. Thanks so much for your comments on that. That's certainly something I can relate to as well. I remember being in university, and when I was graduating, I had a professor tell me that I had three things working against me: that I was very small, that I was very female, and that I was very feminine. And I could have seen that as a real negative, but I decided to use those to my advantage in whatever way I possibly could. I guess by just working harder than my colleagues did. And I guess I personally never saw it as a negative. Thanks so much for your comments there. Sandra or Denise, did you want to make a comment? Go ahead, Denise.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Yeah, I just echo the comments I've heard from Niru. And, I worked in the engineering field my entire career, 30 years. I started in the oil field, the oil patch in Alberta. That was a little bit more challenging. There was definitely a very masculine, very machismo sort of mentality there. The days of calendars on the walls and those kinds of things. But, as I moved on and I joined Amirix, it was the electronics world. Electronic design was a new industry. It was a fairly young industry. And I will say that my experience was incredibly positive. Our founder was so open to anybody taking on responsibility, management, leadership roles that I never felt held back or expected to behave a certain way. It also helped to have good female leaders. Sandra was my CEO for 10 years. And she did a great job of leading us and helping the women to see that you totally were a woman first and allowed to be a woman first. And if you were dealing with family issues, that was an okay thing to deal with, whether you were male or female. That was expected, that you had to deal with that with your career. And so, I think you hear bad stories, and there are bad stories out there, but there's a lot of great success stories too. And the women I work with, and we have a lot of young women on staff now at Innovasi and Amirix and Innovasi, they really are their own individuals. And I don't see that sense of I've got to be like the guys in any way. They just bring their own skills to the table, and it's appreciated.
Great. Thanks, Denise. I'm going to turn things back over to Wendy again. Can you hear us, Wendy?
Thank you.
All
Yes,
right.
thank you. I hope you can hear me. As I said, I'm in rural PEI, and so there you go. We're experiencing this rural-urban divide in connectivity. I'd like to turn to Sandra to answer a question from Kes Morton, if that's okay. And Kes's question is, in COVID-19, women in the workforce are backsliding. What are you doing right now in your role? I guess that's in your advisory role. And what are you seeing as successful strategies to counteract the COVID backslide?
Hi, Cass. So this is an extremely important issue on all the boards I sit. A lot has backslid, but this is a panel about women in tech and ocean tech. It is topmost in the boardroom right now to see what we can do to help to support and to rebuild the good progress that has been made over so many years, certainly since I joined the workforce, and again, not yesterday. But suffice to say that it is top of mind, and that we are looking, by talking to individuals in organizations, not the board specifically, but encouraging management to do so, to talk to individuals and see what they need, and make sure, because every board I sit, there is a diversity and inclusion plan, not just for women, but for other races, etc. So to make sure that we are being cognizant of what is needed so that we don't slip.
Great. Cheri, maybe you'd like to also answer that one.
Yeah, we're, I guess it's an extremely challenging issue, and one that I know that our organization is in, conversations with many others who are advocating for gendered lens to be put on recovery efforts. I think also in our conversations with various industries and employers within those industries, talking about how we can put policies, practices, procedures in place that will really end up being more inclusive for everyone, but will benefit and support women as we move forward in our new reality. Things like flexible remote work. However, we know that does not always work for everyone who have caregiving or child rearing or other responsibilities at home as well. So, I guess right now, from our perspective, I think it's important that we keep it, on the agenda. We keep it important. We keep asking what people need. We keep advocating for supports and for changes that will support women as we recover and move forward.
Great, thank you. Niru, I wondered if you could take this one. And this is whether you know of any good things that are happening in other industries other than the marine industry, and something somewhere that you think we might be able to look to as good examples of female engagement.
Yeah, so thanks to what we do, we're not only in ocean tech, we're in other industries as well. So I interact with lots of companies that are in electronics, medical, and other fields. I think I read something not too long ago that I think in the US, 38% of businesses were women owned. And it got me kind of thinking that that's not too far from us. Those are our neighbors to the south. And imagine all of those women that run all of those businesses and the role models that they're offering their children, their nieces, their nephews. And I think organically, I think a lot of things are happening probably by that alone, and the fact that these young people are seeing people in their community, hopefully in their homes, that are showing them what's possibility. Whether it's for them or not is up to be determined. But but I think overall, in general, there's a discussion that's happening. I think we're open to be able to talk about diversification, whether it's an industry, whether, and not just female, it's inclusivity, it's gender, it's a lot of backgrounds. And I think we're in a different time now. I think 5 years ago, those discussions weren't happening. So now it's just part of everyday vernacular. And I think that's kind of a cool thing, because we don't have to necessarily stress it as much as we would have 20 years ago. I think it's happening, and it's going to continue to happen. And the next generation of entrepreneurs will be far better, more well-rounded than we are, I think, just organically. And so that's kind of a cool thing.
Great, thank you. We have another question from the audience, and I think, Cheri, I'm going to direct it to you first, but anyone else can jump in, of course. This is from Carol Ann Black, and Carol Ann says, what are the best ways to support leadership among women and non-binary people, and what qualities can they develop to become effective leaders? So, Cheri, if you could start.
I think one of the things that I would like to, or where I'd like to start with that, is really echoing, some of Niru's comments on that, in how she has, it's about being authentic. It's about the ability to bring ourselves and bring the best of ourselves to lead others. I think that, feminine qualities of empathy and compassion does not take away from strength, or being decisive, or taking responsibility or accountability, or being able to make good decisions and make a business successful. I think there are many feminine qualities that are very that really lend themselves to the success on business side that maybe we haven't taken advantage of enough in the past, and that it's extremely good to see that we're moving those things in a new direction. I think in terms of supporting, I think it's about providing, again, it's around seeing women in those positions, providing opportunities for them to network. The networking piece was brought up, the mentorship pieces, all those sorts. I'll let someone else join in on that one.
Great, thank you for that, Cheri. I'm going to turn now to, I'm going to ask both Sandra and Denise to answer this one. It's from Catherine Eddy. Catherine asks, what are some strategies that can help us as women achieve more in our male-dominated organizations? So maybe, Sandra, you could start, and then Denise.
Yeah, so, I'm going to stay on that theme of authenticity. Like, I worked in some very male-dominated industries. I mean, the auto industry being one of them. And I guess it was that I, wasn't female it was definitely female, wasn't male, and was not seeing the obstacles. Like I also had a wonderful role model in my mother and my father who made sure that I saw that I could kind of do whatever I wanted to do. So perhaps sometimes I went into organizations naively thinking that there really was equality, and perhaps there wasn't completely, but I think the authenticity part, the taking leadership, taking responsibility. If there's one thing I can remember throughout my career, was never playing a blame game. If something was going wrong, I would often step up and take the responsibility so we could just move past it and come up with a solution. So I think a lot of what we need to do is in us. It's not in the world around us, in order to for us to achieve our own potential.
Very wisely said. I like that. Don't play the blame game, and the authenticity. Denise, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have a lot of different to add. I had a very good experience, and people gave me opportunities. And I think I think part of that was a willingness to say yes to an opportunity. So someone offered me responsibility. I'll just back up a little bit. Working in a technology area, as I did, working with a lot of engineers, computer scientists, to be honest, there was an awful lot of people in that group that didn't have natural leadership, who didn't want leadership, didn't want roles or that kind of responsibility. And so if you were willing to take on a leadership role, if you were willing to manage that project, I often found that people were just jumping at the chance to say, please take it, because nobody else wanted to. So I think putting yourself out there, saying yes, saying, yeah, I'll take that on, being willing to accept failures. Things don't always work, you learn from them. Grabbing every educational opportunity that you can. So every company I've ever worked for has always put out there that you can get more professional development, take leadership courses. So jumping at all of that. But I think ultimately it was the willingness to say, yes, I'll do that project. And even when inside, I was probably thinking, oh my gosh, I have no idea how I'm going to do that project. And it usually worked out really well.
Great, thank you. Niru, did you want to jump in on that one?
I'm not sure I have much else to add that Sandra and Denise probably have already shared with the group.
Okay, then I'll move on to another question. And this is about another project I kind of alluded to earlier at COVE, where we know that research conducted by COVE in the Workforce Initiative focused on student intentions and perceptions, and that this research has found that females in grades 6 to 12 continue to report intentions to pursue careers in the caring professions like social work, nursing, and teaching, etc. And of course, these are extremely important and honorable careers that help to elevate communities, yet these young girls are still not seeing themselves in roles where they can have even more impact by starting or leading a business, employing people, and gaining influence and power to help shape society. So I'd like your thoughts, and I will start with Niru and then go to Cheri. And of course, Sandra and Denise can jump in if they like. How can we do a better job of socializing girls from a much younger age to consider a broader range of careers? So Niru, then Cheri, please.
So I have two girls, they're 7 and 9, so I kind of face this on a daily basis. They see what their mom does, and they're kids, they probably discount what their mom does at the same time. But I like to put them in front of other strong individuals. I have good friends that are lawyers, that are nurses. They see a little bit of everything. I try to paint a picture of what's possible, but ultimately I'm just trying to make them curious. And I'm hoping that if I can foster curiosity in the kids, that they will eventually become curious adults that want to seek out fulfilling careers, whatever that might look like. And I'm hoping also that a little bit of curiosity will advance their competency. And I say competency a lot because I think that's really important as part of the authenticity piece. Is if you're curious, you're likely going to be authentic, and then you'll hopefully, if you work hard, be competent. And I tell them that every day, is that, if you're curious and you work hard, you will likely be fairly successful. So that's my approach within my own household. I don't know if it's going to work or not. You can ask me in about 20 years.
Great. Cheri, your thoughts on that question?
I'll mention that I'm a mom. I have a boy and a girl. I don't think that any of our youth, and I'm not sure, of the details of what's happening in, the other provinces, but I know here in Newfoundland, career development has not had or has not been prioritized enough, I don't think, for youth in general, particularly when it comes to careers like ocean tech, anything in the skilled trades area, really letting youth see, have opportunities to try out, experience, know about different types of careers. And then for females and for my daughter, I think there's a whole added level of her, perceptions and, maybe misperceptions, incorrect perceptions of what is possible in certain types of careers. So I know WRDC has a series of STEM for Girls programs, and we, know that, young females are often very interested in careers where they feel that they can make the world a better place, where they can do something to help. And, so one of the things we created was an engineering solutions program, as an example, that is a one-day workshop where they learned about various types of engineering, but also how engineering is used to make the world a better place. And, the feedback we get from girls then is that suddenly they're considering careers that they had never thought of, knew existed, or never thought they would be interested in prior to that. So I think those types of opportunities are really important.
Great, thank you. Sandra, I have a question here from Jane McGinnis that I'm going to ask you to respond to, and that is, in your career, it says, have any of you felt challenged in making any of your career or industry shifts? So I'll start with Sandra, and again, if the others want to.
Oh, you just left. My answer to that is pretty quick, no. I changed verticals, I've changed here and there, again, decisions that I made and that I decided to follow through on. I just did want to add one small thing to the discussion, the last question though. And just very quickly, because Cheri and Niru totally nailed that one. It first starts in the family, and then we have to create situations, and I'll tell you from a communications background, communicate differently. And I want to give you a quick little example of that. Statistics and studies show that women will only apply to a job if they feel they have 100% of the qualifications that are listed, and men typically, if they have 60%, will apply. And surprisingly, it's not due to a lack of confidence. That's not saying that women aren't as confident as men. It's just saying that they expect that they will not get the job. They will waste their time and effort applying for something that they don't feel that they meet the qualifications for. So that, I think, is important to the way we talk to girls in grade 6 to 12 and the way we talk to our own children, because I think it's extremely important. We're not going to change them if they feel they want to have a career in a caring field, but we need to use words that help them to understand that there are fields, that allow them to apply that in terms of changing the world, in terms of saving, the animals that inhabit this world, those types of things. So the importance is that we use different words in different ways, I think, to encourage them to, again, see themselves in these industries.
Wonderful, thank you. Denise, you want to jump in on that one? Because I have another one for you.
Yeah, I want to add a couple points too, and we've covered a lot of great material on this, but when we think about young women, as far as we've come, and we have come such a long way in the way we talk about women today in non-traditional fields, but I still think we soft pedal the discussion when we talk to young women about their career choices. We use words like passions and something you're going to enjoy, what you're going to, and that's fantastic, awesome. We all want to enjoy what we do. I think you can enjoy anything you do if you bring passion to it. But we talk to our young boys about earning a good living. We talk to them about supporting their families, about choosing something that's going to be lucrative, has the opportunity to be lucrative. And I don't think we do that as much with our girls. So I think that the reason a young man might apply for a job when he doesn't necessarily have all the skills that the job is asking is he's going for it. He says, I have to earn a good living. And I don't know that we do enough of that with our young women to encourage them to really, I've read statistics that say the number of households that are women-led, whether that be a single woman leading a single family or where the female is the primary breadwinner, is growing dramatically. So our young women need to be prepared to take care of themselves, to be able to afford their families and take care of their homes. They need to go after these good jobs. And I often say to young women, why are we giving all the opportunities just to the boys? Let's go out and go after those as well. So I do think there's that bit of the language in the way we speak. One other quick one I'll just throw in there, just to, again, going back to communication and language. And Wendy, you mentioned it very clearly. running a business, whether you're a business leader, technology leader, an entrepreneur, is an incredibly impactful thing. And we don't talk about it that way in our society. We hold award ceremonies for people who do wonderful charitable things, and that's fantastic, and we should do that. But we often don't speak positively of our business leaders that hire thousands of people every day. Those people make the difference. The people who take the risk, who start companies like Niru's family did, that's huge. And I think if we spoke in more positive terms about that, we would attract both men and women, but people who are saying, I want to make sure I make a difference in this world, start a company, hire 100 people, create a product that makes a difference in the world. And we certainly did that at Amirix, and we felt very good about that. And I'd like to see more of that kind of language. I think that could really do a lot to change the thinking of young people in general, and certainly young women.
Wonderful. Thank you kindly. I think this next one is for Cheri, and it's from Christina Cunningham. Cheri, and anybody else who wants to jump in. I like the fact that you're getting jumped in now. As well as encouraging more young women to seek careers in ocean tech, are there any networks or resources that you would recommend to someone looking to move into the sector mid-career? So this is a good thing, people mid-career wishing to move into the sector. So Cheri, and then anyone else.
I would think that may be somewhat dependent upon your location. I know that there are, and as well, I guess, dependent upon your own individual situation in terms of what qualifications you have, what type of, what career position you may be interested in. So, I think immediately in Newfoundland, there are organizations like ours, like Women in Resource Development Corporation. Nova Scotia, there's Women Unlimited. Depending upon if you were someone who needed retraining or needed to explore, the types of careers to have some idea of what you might like. I think there are places and people who offer career development or career coaching who could really help you figure that out and maybe the best path forward. With our organization, in addition to the STEM for Girls programs that we have, we also have career development professionals who do career coaching one-on-one with women. And we also have a whole range of employer services, because if we're going to get girls interested and women trained and employed, we want to make sure that the places that they're working are supportive and inclusive, and they have an opportunity to advance and be successful. So, so I think that there's, various ways, but I think it really depends on individual situations and what supports are available in your particular area. So I'd suggest reaching out maybe.
Great. Thank you. Now I'm going to ask each, Niru, please do jump in, and then I have a question for all of you to respond to.
I was just going to do a little shout out to Cove. I know pre-COVID we had a lot of ocean connectors. So in Nova Scotia, anyone that's sort of in the HRM area, I would highly recommend somebody that wants to move into the sector to attend one of the connectors. It's a great way to meet a really wide swath of individuals that are already in ocean tech. And just that would be great, I think, a way to meet people and get to know the sector a little better.
Excellent, yes, and thank you for that, Niru. Okay, Kes, I know you think I've been ignoring you. I haven't, but I already had a question for you. But this last one I have run into, and probably you have too. And Kes says, lately I've had more than one person in my circle suggest that white males are being excluded and have fewer opportunities due to D&I initiatives. How do you respond to that? So I'm going to ask Denise to start.
Okay, well, I don't have good stats in front of me to back up what I'm going to say. I'm just going to base it on my own observations, whether it be various businesses that I've been involved with or have met with through supply channels and whatnot. And, I continue to see young men do very well. I have a young man as a son, and him and his friends. I don't see them being limited in any way, shape, or form. They're bright young guys, and they're doing great. I go to companies all the time. I still see far more men on the boards, on the senior management teams. So I guess if we saw things swing really far the other way, and 70-80% of our companies were being run by women, there might be some validity to that comment. But I think there's more people to compete with, for sure, as we give more opportunity to young women. But I think the pie expands. I really do. I think the more people we get involved in our economy, the bigger it grows. So I think there's room for everybody.
Thanks. Niru, what would you say to this?
Well, I'm a big believer in competency, and so we've never really had an inclusion or diversity strategy. We just like to hire best fit for the job, and I think as long as other companies sort of follow that mantra, I don't think it's an issue. But I would sort of echo what Denise said, in that the boards are still far more outnumbered by men than there are women. And I think especially now as hiring managers, the demographics of hiring managers changes. So I don't know that where we were 20 years ago, you've got men or women that are hiring that are probably in their 30s or 40s, and they've got a very different outlook than maybe what was happening 20 years ago. And so I think all of those diversity and inclusion conversations are not really conversations. They just happen organically now, as opposed to the way things happened maybe 20 years ago. My 2 cents.
Nice. Great, thank you. And I'm just changing the rules a bit here, Cheri and Sandra, but I want to have you two comment. And I've just changed it a little bit to say, how can we make the ocean more compelling and intriguing to both males and females in the next generation, so that we really do have equity or parity? So Cheri, and then the last word to Sandra.
Yeah, so one of the things that I would like to say, because it's, every time, it's regular to have this kind of backlash out there when it comes to gender equity or other types of diversity and inclusive practices, where we're trying to even the field. And, when we think about it, our systems, the way we work, our processes, our practices have all been based historically on males, on white males, on single income families, on all sorts of things that the world is changing and our society is changing, and we need things to change along with that. I know that in Newfoundland, one of the areas where we've seen a huge amount of success has been on industrial work sites in increasing the participation of women. From the time we first started, it was around 1%, and up to more recent projects, it's been upwards of 14% and up, and that has taken a lot of hard work. It took regulatory processes, it took setting targets, it took setting up supports. And we know now some of the things that are really important in making those types of things work involves, the buy-in of leadership, incorporating, diversity and inclusion as a business, a key part of your business. There has to be buy-in, and then there's a whole, range of creating strategy, doing the assessments of your own environment, education and training initiatives, continued monitoring and evaluation of your actions and of your initiatives. And it's, not in any way do we ever recommend hiring anyone who is unqualified for a position. But we do know that most of our regular or ongoing business practices and processes actually, men would have a greater, opportunity in terms of being hired for those. So if we don't put some gender and equity initiatives in place, the research is showing that things will not become equal for a long, long time. So I think that some of those things are necessary.
Yeah. Good. Great, thank you. And Sandra, final word to you.
just what you were asking there too, Wendy, in terms of how do we, make it more interesting to both male and female. And I would just do a quick shout out to Dr. Cheri Scully for the work that she did in developing a curriculum for students. So, I've walked through some of that. I've read it. It's fantastic. And basically, to me, it boils down to, one of my passions, which is communications. We have to show up. We have to communicate. We have to let kids know that there are careers available in ocean tech, and that it will be it would have a big impact on not only the Nova Scotian economy, their own lives, but the global economy. So kudos to Cheri for the work that you've put into that already. We need more of that.
Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you to everybody. Thank you, first of all, to the panelists. I think that was fantastic. We had a lot of interest. And I loved your answers. I will have to go back to the YouTube to listen to them all, since I won't mention the rural-urban divide again. But anyway, there you go. I'd also like to thank again all the co-workers, and Cheri, especially to you, for inviting us to participate in this panel. I personally have enjoyed it very much. And especially I'd like to thank all the participants. I didn't see 240 different questions, but I'm delighted that there was so much interest, and I do thank those of you who did ask questions. And to say, I don't know, Cheri, if you want an unpaid political announcement here at the next COVE event,
Yeah.
But I'll turn it to you and say thank you immensely. It was, I really enjoyed it. So Cheri, and then I guess we'll say goodbye.
Great. Thanks so much, Wendy. I appreciate you moderating this. And thanks so much to Denise and Niru and Cheri and Sandra for your time this afternoon. Thanks, of course, to the whole COVE team for making this happen. They do a great job of putting these together. And to Anna, who works very closely with me on all of our research and all of our resources that we put out. Appreciate that. I did just want to mention, please do stay tuned for our next panel in these Changing Tide series, which will be held on October 14th at the same time from 1 to 2 o'clock. And at that panel, we're going to have a conversation about engaging newcomers to Canada and immigrants, and also about hiring international talent to Canada's blue economy. So thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you in a few weeks.